Do you ever wonder what the future holds? Maybe you dream of flying cars or a world without disease. But what if you didn't get to wonder anymore? What if every time you close your eyes, the world leaped forward without you, and you woke up in a time that barely remembered your name? That's what happened to me. My name is David Lang, and this is a story of how I lost control of time and maybe reality itself. Every time I fall asleep, I wake up in another year, and the longer this goes on, the more I fear I'm not just moving through time. I'm being hunted in it. They say dreams are the mind's way of untangling reality. But what if sleep didn't just bring dreams, but stole your place in time? The first time it happened, I thought it was a hallucination, or maybe sleep deprivation. But when I woke up, everything around me had changed. It wasn't just a shift in scenery or a bad dream. It was a different year entirely. I was 17 the first time it happened. A regular high school senior, stuck in the monotony of suburban life in 2023. Homework, awkward friendships, and the same walk to school every morning. My parents were both teachers. My younger sister had a mild obsession with bugs. And I was just trying to survive the final stretch before graduation. Nothing about my life felt significant. Nothing screamed chosen or special. But that night, something unexplainable began. It was a Tuesday. I remember it clearly because of how completely ordinary it was. I'd just flunked a math test, argued with my best friend over something petty, and walked home under a sky the color of old paper. I remember laying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, headphones blasting a playlist that always helped me drift off. The last thing I saw was the red glow of my alarm clock blinking 11:32 p.m. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through a window I didn't recognize. The bed felt unfamiliar, too firm, too cold. And the room, it wasn't mine. Gone were the posters on my wall, the cracked closet mirror, the crooked bookshelf. In their place was a stark, minimalistic space with white panel walls and a desk that looked like it belonged in a science lab. I sat up, heart hammering against my ribs. My first thought was that I'd been kidnapped, or worse, died and reincarnated in a sterile afterlife. But then I saw it, the date on the glowing panel embedded into the wall. April 12th, 2030. I blinked and stayed, feeling the numbers burn into my mind. 7 years. I was 17 when I went to sleep, but this date said I was 24. Panic coursed through me. I stumbled out of bed and into what looked like a bathroom, only to catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I gasped. The person staring back at me had my face, but it was older, hardened. There was a faint scar over my left eyebrow I'd never had before, and my jaw was more defined. I looked, groaned. My voice cracked when I whispered, "What the hell?" I scrambled through the room, looking for answers. A journal, a phone, anything. But the drawers were locked, the screen on the wall didn't respond to touch, and the door was sealed shut. It was like I was being observed, or maybe protected. I wasn't sure which. Then came the knock. A woman's voice filtered through a speaker embedded in the ceiling. "Aaron, are you awake? It's time for your update." Update? Who the hell was Aaron? Was that supposed to be me? I backed away from the door, pressing myself into the far corner. My name was Daniel. I hadn't changed it. I didn't think so, anyway. But maybe in the years I'd somehow skipped, something had happened. Something that changed me. The door slid open with a hiss, and a woman stepped in wearing a gray uniform that looked like something out of a futuristic movie. She was holding a tablet and smiling softly, as if this was all perfectly normal. "Good morning. I know this is disorienting. It always is, but we've gone over this before. You slipped again." "Slipped?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Yes," she said patiently. "You're experiencing another temporal regression. It's part of your condition. You've jumped from 2023 to 2030 again, but it's all right. We prepared for this." I felt dizzy. My legs buckled, and she caught me before I hit the floor. As she helped me sit, she continued talking, explaining things that sounded impossible. I was part of a study, voluntary, apparently. I had what they called temporal displacement syndrome, a rare neurological condition that caused me to skip years whenever I entered IEM sleep. Every time I went to sleep, there was a chance I'd wake up in a different year. My body aged normally, but my mind, it skipped. like flipping pages of a book without reading them. I didn't believe her. How could I have agreed to something like this? I hadn't. I was 17. This wasn't real. But then she showed me the videos. Footage of me, older, talking into a camera, describing everything. How I'd discovered my condition. How I'd volunteered for treatment and study. I looked terrified in the clips. Exhausted. My future self warned that every time I returned, I'd remember less and less. That I needed to trust the team, no matter how strange things got. And strangest of all, I kept saying the same phrase over and over. Don't fall asleep again. The rest of the day was a blur. I was fed, monitored, asked dozens of questions about what I remembered. Apparently, I'd been in 2029 just a day before. The staff seemed both clinical and compassionate, like they were dealing with a rare animal that might bolt at any moment. By evening, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, terrified to let my eyelids fall. But the body has limits, and fear only delays the inevitable. Sleep came like a thief, and when I woke up again, I was in a hospital. The date? August 2nd, 2042. I screamed. Nurses rushed in. Machines beeped. Someone shouted to sedate me. I begged them to tell me what year it was. They all looked at me like I was mad. One whispered, "He's regressing again." A different man entered the room this time. He was older, with silver at his temples and a weathered badge on his coat. He leaned down and said gently, "Daniel, you've been gone for 12 years. I sobbed, not just because of the time lost, but because this time. I couldn't even remember my own last name. 12 years. That's what the man told me as I sat trembling in the hospital bed, unable to even remember the shape of my mother's face. My name was Daniel. At least, I thought it was, but even that now felt slippery, like a word in a foreign language I only vaguely understood. I wanted to protest, to scream that they had the wrong person, that this was a mistake. But deep down, I knew the truth. Every time I fell asleep, I was waking up in a different year. And every time I did, a piece of me stayed behind. The hospital they had me in wasn't a traditional one. There were no beeping heart monitors or rows of white beds. It felt more like a facility. Glass walls, muted colors, digital panels flickering with biometric data I didn't understand. The windows showed a skyline I didn't recognize. Drones zipped by like mechanical birds. Cars hovered instead of rolled. It was 2042, and I was a stranger in my own life. They kept calling me Mr. Voss. Apparently, that was my last name, Daniel Voss. It sounded sharp, unfamiliar, too formal for the boy I remembered being. I didn't recognize the name at all. And what scared me more than anything wasn't the sterile room or the gray-haired doctor who spoke like he knew me intimately. It was the photos they showed me. Dozens of them. Me, older, smiling in some. Haunted in others. One photo showed me standing at a podium, mid-speech, a large banner behind me reading, Temporal Research Coalition, Annual Summit 2038. Another showed me shaking hands with a woman whose eyes looked as empty as mine now felt. I flipped through them, numb, watching myself age, watching my life happen without me. The doctor's name was Henrik Kite. He explained that I had become a leading voice in temporal neurology, specifically in the study of sleep-induced displacement. That after years of research, I'd helped develop something called memory anchors, devices that were supposed to store a version of my core identity, so that even if I lost everything, they could bring me back. But they weren't working anymore. The jumps are increasing in distance, Henrik said, his voice low and regretful. And your mind, it's fraying, Daniel. You're only remembering fragments now. The further forward you go, the less of yourself you retain. I looked at him, broken. Why would I keep doing this? Henrik hesitated. Then, carefully, he said, because you're looking for something. Or someone. You insisted it was the only way. I tried to ask who, but before I could finish the sentence, a sharp pain sliced through my skull. A memory flashed. A face. Brown eyes. A laugh like wind chimes in the summer. But it was gone as quickly as it came. I doubled over, groaning. Henrik pressed a button, and a nurse rushed in, injecting something into my arm. Warmth flooded my body, and the world tilted sideways. The last thing I heard before sleep took me was Henrik whispering, "You're getting closer." When I woke again, the world was different. Not just a room, but the air, the weight of it, the silence. I sat up slowly, blinking against dim orange light filtering through cracks in dusty windows. It took me a moment to realize I was no longer in a facility. This room looked like an abandoned apartment. Peeling wallpaper, shattered glass on the floor, and a faint metallic scent that lingered like rusted memories. A calendar on the wall, half-torn, read, November 18th, 2057. I staggered to my feet. My body was sore, older, once again. In the mirror above the dresser, my reflection startled me. I had a grizzled beard, hollow cheeks, and a streak of white through my hair. My hands trembled. I must have been in my early 50s now, but I didn't feel like someone in their 50s. My mind still clung to that scared 17-year-old boy who just wanted to go back to his room and listen to music on a rainy night. The city outside was not the one I remembered, not even the one from 2042. The streets were mostly empty, buildings draped in banners that read Safe Sleep Initiative, Protect the Present. Posters on walls depicted images of neural helmets, pills, and slogans like Stay Awake, Stay Safe. Whatever had happened to the world, it was tied to sleep and to people like me. I found a small handheld device on the table by the door. It activated when I picked it up and displayed a familiar face. Mine. The older me. Tired, hollow-eyed, but still fighting. A pre-recorded message played. Daniel, if you're seeing this, you've made it to 2057. You've probably forgotten most of everything by now. So here's what you need to know. They're lying. The Temporal Research Coalition, Henrik, the Safe Sleep people, all of them. They told you the jumps were a condition. They are not. They are a program. My mouth went dry. I volunteered. Yes, but it wasn't because I was sick. I was trying to stop something. And you're the only one who can finish what we started. You'll find what you need in Sector 12, beneath the old transit hub. Don't trust anyone until you get there. And whatever you do, don't let them put you back to sleep. The message ended. I stood there, frozen, confused, shaking. What was this? A rebellion? A cover-up? Had I been used all along? I left the apartment. The streets were cracked, and most storefronts were boarded up. Sirens echoed in the distance. I moved like a ghost, unrecognized and unremembered. Everyone wore these thin helmets over their temples, devices that pulsed with faint blue lights. Some looked dazed. Others twitched when they walked. It was like society had become addicted to being awake, to not dreaming. I overheard a man mutter to himself, "Sleep is a curse. Don't close your eyes." As I made my way to Sector 12, fragments of memory returned. A name, Lena. I didn't know who she was exactly, but the name filled my chest with warmth and pain. Was she the one I was looking for? Had I lost her? Or had she vanished somewhere in the years I skipped like broken pages? At the edge of the transit hub, I was stopped by a guard in a white uniform bearing the Coalition insignia. He looked at my face, narrowed his eyes, and said, "Voss?" I ran. Bullets hissed past me, barely missing. I ducked into an alley, then through a rusted door that led into the belly of the ruined subway station. The air inside was cold and damp, heavy with decay. But beneath it, something pulsed. A faint electric hum. I followed it until I reached a stairwell that descended into darkness. There, at the very bottom, I found a vault-like door with a biometric scanner. I didn't hesitate. I pressed my hand against it. It scanned for a moment, then clicked open. Inside was a small room lined with servers and old equipment. And in the center, another version of me. Or rather, a simulation. A hologram. He looked directly at me and said, "You've made it. Finally. I knew you would. But this is where it gets dangerous." The hologram reached forward, and the room shifted, revealing a network of files, digital maps, and something labeled Project, ChronoSeed. Apparently, everything I'd been through wasn't an accident. It was part of an experiment meant to test the limits of memory, identity, and time perception. But somewhere along the line, the experiment escaped control. Time jumpers like me started losing themselves. Some never came back. And Lena? She'd been one of them. I stared at her file, shaking. I remembered her laughter now. Her promise. If we ever get separated, I'll find you, no matter how far forward you go. I collapsed to my knees, overwhelmed. The weight of decades I'd never lived pressed against my chest like stone. And I knew, without a doubt, if I closed my eyes again, I might never wake up as myself again. But I had no choice. The data in this room was incomplete. There was another piece, one that only existed in the future. One more jump. One more year. I laid down on the floor and whispered, "Please, let me remember." Then I let sleep take me. When I opened my eyes again, everything was white. Not the sterile white of a hospital room or the icy frost of winter, but an endless, horizonless expanse of light. I was lying on something soft, but there was no texture, no ceiling, no sky. It felt like floating in a dream someone else had forgotten to finish. My body was older again. I could feel the ache in my joints, the stiffness in my back. But more than that, I could feel something missing. My memories were dim silhouettes behind thick glass. I couldn't recall my parents' names. Couldn't remember what my childhood bedroom looked like. Even Lena's face, so vivid before, had become a blur in my mind. Then a voice spoke, calm, synthetic, yet somehow familiar. "Welcome, Daniel Voss. Year, 2099. Status, terminal displacement confirmed." My heart slammed against my ribs. 2099. That was 4 to 2 years from when I'd first fallen asleep in 2023. I'd leapt across nearly half a century like skipping stones across a lake. And now, I was on the last ripple. The light around me shifted, and suddenly I was no longer alone. A figure formed from the brightness, an artificial construct, humanoid in shape, its face blank but vaguely resembling my own. It nodded at me with a kind of solemn reverence. "You've reached the end," it said. "This is a boundary between the conscious mind and the collapse point. You are the last traveler." I wanted to speak, but my throat was dry. I finally managed, "What does that mean, collapse point?" The figure gestured, and an image appeared in the air beside it, a digital visualization of a brain, mine presumably, flickering with dim lights like a dying star. Every time you jumped forward, fragments of your identity were left behind. Pieces of memory, emotion, continuity. Your mind is now unstable, fractured beyond recovery. One more jump, and there will be nothing left of you to wake up. I stared at the projection, horrified. So this is it. The construct hesitated. "Unless you find the anchor." That word again, anchor. Henrik had mentioned it. So had my future self in the apartment in 2057. It was supposed to store who I was, my essence. If it existed, it was the only chance I had left. "I need to find Lena," I said. The name burned on my tongue like a lit match. The construct seemed to freeze. Then it turned toward me. "You were warned not to search for her." "Why?" I demanded. Was she real, or just part of the experiment? "She was a constant," it replied slowly. "A shared focal point created during the ChronoSeed trials. A convergence entity. She was more than real. She was a link between time threads. And when she vanished during the final test, so did stability." I struggled to understand. "You're saying she was part of what kept the timeline stable?" "Yes. You loved her. That made the connection stronger than expected. When she was lost, everything began unraveling, including you." My knees buckled. I dropped to the glowing floor, hands trembling. Lena wasn't just someone I loved. She was why this had all started. She had been part of the program, maybe even a subject like me. And I'd lost her in one of the jumps, forgotten her long enough for her to become unreachable. "Where is she now?" I whispered. The construct didn't answer right away. Then it raised a hand, and a second image formed, of a stasis pod, sealed, floating in a vast chamber of machines. Inside was a woman with dark hair, eyes closed, hands folded over her chest like a sleeping queen. 2099, Facility Alpha 7. She has been in stasis for 41 years. Her mind, like yours, is fragmented, but her anchor still exists. I staggered to my feet. "Then send me there. Wake her. We'll fix this together." The figure paused. "If you enter her chamber, there's no return. This environment, this memory zone, is a protective buffer. Leaving it will begin your final collapse. I didn't care. I was already a ghost in my own story, drifting through time like a torn photograph. If Lena was the last tether to whatever life I had left, then I had to try. The world dissolved again, and I dropped. This time, I landed hard. The chamber was silent, humming with power. The walls curved like cocoon, panels blinking with soft blue light. Tubes snaked from the ceiling into dozens of pods, each housing someone in cryosleep. But only one was lit with a red indicator. Lena's. I stepped closer. My hands trembled as I wiped condensation from the glass. Her face was exactly as I remembered, soft, serene, untouched by the 40 years that had passed. I wanted to touch her, hold her, but I didn't know if she'd even remember me. A screen blinked on beside the pod. Subject, Lena Miles. Status, dormant. Anchor link, intact. Memory core, incomplete. There was a prompt below it. Merge anchor, wire N. I hesitated. Merging would bind my fractured identity with hers. One final chance to bring coherence to two broken minds. But it could also destroy us both. Still, I pressed Y. The lights flared. Electricity surged. I felt a jolt, like every cell in my body was being rewritten. My knees gave out and I collapsed against the pod, gasping. Images flooded my mind, our memories. Walking along the river. Late-night talks about escaping the experiment. Her laughter in the snow. Our promises to each other. And then her eyes opened. At first, she didn't move. Just blinked, disoriented. Then slowly, she looked at me. Recognition dawned, cautious, but real. Daniel, she whispered. I laughed. It was raw, broken, but real. Yeah, it's me. She touched the glass between us. You found me. The chamber lights dimmed, warning sirens flashing. The system was collapsing. Time itself was unraveling inside the facility. I felt my mind flickering, memory blinking like a dying flame. But I could feel her hand. Warm. Real. Lena opened the pod and stepped out, unsteady but conscious. She wrapped her arms around me, and I could feel the weight of the years slip away. For one moment, everything was still. And then we ran. Together. Through the shuddering corridors of the dying facility, through the echoes of decades we'd lost, towards something uncertain, but finally real. The metal screamed around us as Lena and I bolted to the collapsing facility, sirens howling like the end of the world. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The floor beneath us trembled with every step. Somewhere deep inside the infrastructure, the system we had awakened was breaking apart, something far older and more dangerous than either of us had understood. But we didn't stop. Not when the lights dimmed. Not when the walls split. Not even when the whole way ahead was swallowed in smoke. Because after 40 years, we had found each other again. And that meant everything. Lena gripped my hand tightly as we ducked beneath a fallen beam, her breath ragged. Even though she looked young, just as I remembered her, I knew the years had touched her the same way they'd haunted me. Her eyes weren't just filled with recognition. They were filled with grief, with memories of being lost in a world that kept moving while we were trapped in place. We reached the emergency lift near the rear exit. The door stuttered open, and we threw ourselves inside, just as a shockwave rolled through the corridor and shattered the glass behind us. The elevator dropped with a jolt, lights flickering. I remember now, she whispered as we descended. The ChronoSeed Project, they didn't just experiment with time travel. They were editing time, choosing what stayed and what got erased. I turned to her, stunned. Erased! She nodded. We were part of a pilot group, not just sleepers. Anchors. They wanted to see if human consciousness could carry data across altered timelines. They said we were helping preserve history, but they were testing how much of ourselves could be overwritten. My mind reeled. Suddenly, so much made sense, why I kept waking in different years with different versions of myself scattered across them like echoes. Why Lena had disappeared. Why entire chunks of my life had vanished without explanation. They didn't just want to study time, she continued. They wanted to own it. The lift shuddered to a stop. The door slid open to a night sky blanketed in purple smog. We emerge into the ruins of what must have once been a sprawling metropolis, now just a graveyard of steel and silence. Towering buildings lean like corpses, their windows hollow. The air smelled like burnt circuits and dust. This isn't Earth, is it? I asked quietly. Lena looked at me, her expression unreadable. Not the one we knew. It hit me like a punch. Somewhere in the years I jumped, somewhere during one of those long, unremembered sleeps, something had changed. A timeline had shifted, been rewritten. This world was a version of our future, but not the future that was supposed to exist. We weren't just in 2099. We were in an alternate 2099, a timeline that should never have happened. We wandered through the ghost city, following Lena's memory of an old safe house from the program days. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. There were still caches of supplies, energy packs, interface gloves, a few dusty tablets flickering with unstable data. She powered one on, and a fractured logo appeared. ChronoSeed Omega node. Access level. Off-grid. Her fingers danced across the screen. Maps bloomed. Lines of code unfurled. Static crackled through half-broken speakers. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm trying to locate the final anchor," she said. "Yours." It was split after your second jump, hidden somewhere outside the central stream. "Why would they split my anchor?" "To keep you from stopping them." The room darkened as she pulled up a sequence of encrypted logs. Faces flickered across the screen. Doctors, engineers, Henrik Kite, and someone else. A woman with silver eyes and a voice like velvet, speaking into the camera. "Anchor Voss 3 has become unstable. Prepare to fragment and store portions in TZ locations. Ensure convergence lock remains hidden." Lena froze the image. "That's Dr. Elira Naveen," she said slowly. "She was a real architect of this. Not Henrik. He was just a cover." We both stared at the screen. The logs hinted at something even more terrifying. That Elira hadn't just orchestrated the time jumps. She had engineered them as a recursive loop. A trap. And I was the mouse inside it. "She used you, Daniel," Lena said softly. "She used all of us." Outside, the sky began to pulse with unnatural light, veins of gold and violet streaking through the clouds. The atmosphere groaned. Lena's eyes widened. "She's initiating the convergence." I didn't understand. "What's the convergence?" "It's a collapse of unapproved timelines. A purge. Everything that doesn't match the Coalition's designated reality gets wiped, including us." We had minutes, maybe less. Lena opened a hidden hatch in the floor, revealing a compact cryo capsule embedded with deep memory transfer tech. Inside was a sleek headset connected to a thick black cable, an anchor uplink. "This can bring you back," she said. "Back to where it all began. But only once. One final jump." I stared at her. "Back to 2023. She nodded. "Your room. Your bed. The night you first fell asleep. You can stop this. Warn yourself before it begins." I looked at the headset, then at her. "What about you?" Her smile was sad, but resolute. "I'm already a ghost here, Daniel. I've lived in the gaps for too long. But if you make it back, if you reset everything, I'll be there. The real me. The girl you knew before all of this." Tears stung my eyes. I reached out, held her face in my hands, and whispered, "I'll find you again." "You always do," she whispered back. I climbed into the capsule and slipped on the headset. The world around me began to blur, flicker, distort. My heart pounded. My mind felt like it was tearing down the middle. "Close your eyes," Lena said, voice shaking. "And don't forget who you are." And then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, rain was tapping softly against my window. The ceiling above me was familiar. The hum of my phone charger, the messy pile of clothes, the glow of my laptop screen on sleep mode, all exactly as I remembered. I shot upright in bed, gasping. My body was young again. My hands were smooth. My heart was racing. I reached for the phone and checked the date. October 13th, 2023. The night it all began. I stumbled to the mirror. My reflection stared back, shocked, disoriented, but whole. I was back, but I didn't have much time. I remembered everything. The jumps, the anchor, Lena, Elvira, the collapse. I had to stop it before it started, before the coalition began recruiting, before the experiment began. I ran to my desk and pulled out the notebook where I'd written dreams before. I started scribbling names, dates, everything I could remember. Then I wrote 4 words in big, bold letters. Do not fall asleep. The rain pattered against my window in a rhythmic pulse, almost too perfect, too familiar. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the words I'd just written on the notebook. Do not fall asleep. My hand shook as I closed it, pressing the journal to my chest, as if somehow that small act could prevent the chaos I knew was coming. But no matter how tightly I clutched it, no matter how desperately I willed the past to stay gone, I felt the weight of the timeline pressing against me. I wasn't just racing against time. I was racing against myself. I stood up, pacing back and forth. My thoughts were frantic, each one darting in a different direction. The problem was simple, yet insurmountable. I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. I knew how this worked. I knew how easy it was to slip into the familiar rhythm of sleep, to let the exhaustion of the day overtake me, only to wake up years later, disoriented and lost in a timeline that didn't make sense. Each jump had wiped away the last one. Each new year was a fresh nightmare, a reality that collapsed in on itself the moment I tried to hold it together. And yet, here I was, back in the beginning, back in 2023, the first time I'd ever fallen asleep. But now, everything felt different. The knowledge of what was to come, of the choices I'd made, of the mistakes I'd allowed to happen, hung like a noose around my neck. I couldn't let it happen again. Not Lena, not the ChronoSeed Project, not Alara Naveen and her twisted experiments. I thought about the capsule Lena had sent me back with, the memory transfer tech. I'd barely understood it when I saw it, but now it was crystal clear. It wasn't just a device to reset the jumps. It was a tool to anchor me, to keep me tethered to this moment, to this timeline. If I failed to use it, everything would spiral out of control once again, and the collapse would be irreversible. I was at a crossroads. I could return to the dreamlike state of my life, going about my days without truly understanding the consequences of my actions until the experiment dragged me back into its web. Or I could fight, make sure I never woke up in another year again, that I remained in control of my own fate. The choice seemed simple, but my body betrayed me. The weight of exhaustion, the creeping pull of sleep, gnawed at me. I glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. My mind was fraying, my body was weak, and the pull to close my eyes was stronger than ever. But if I did, I knew I'd lose. Everything would begin again. I stumbled to the door, and for the first time, I didn't hesitate. I had to find the ChronoSeed facility. I had to destroy it, before the next experiment even began. Lena was counting on me. The world was counting on me. But as I pulled on my jacket and opened the door, I froze. Outside my window, the world had changed. It wasn't just rain. It was a sky, unnatural, swirling, a storm that didn't belong to this reality. It was as if the fabric of time itself was tearing, pieces of future and past colliding into the present. I could see buildings that hadn't been there a moment ago, towering in the distance. There were cars on the streets that didn't belong in 2023. A strange hum in the air, like the low buzz of machinery that no one could explain. I stepped outside cautiously, the cold air biting at my skin. The city felt wrong, like it was being overwritten. Each step I took seemed to distort the world, as if the timeline was fighting to collapse. I could feel it, like a pulse in the ground, like a heartbeat pounding beneath my feet. The more I moved forward, the more everything blurred. The dreamlike haze from before was creeping in again. My surroundings shifted. Buildings changed. The streets turned into a labyrinth that didn't exist a second ago. Was I being dragged back to the future? Was this just another jump I couldn't control? I kept walking. No matter how disoriented I felt, I couldn't stop. Not now. I had to reach the ChronoSeed facility and end this. Lena's voice echoed in my mind. Do not fall asleep. As I made my way through the shifting city, I found myself at a familiar intersection. It was the same street I'd seen in 2099, the same one I'd run through with Lena in the crumbling future. But now, it was alive again, still vibrant, still full of people, still waiting for the inevitable. In the distance, I saw it, The facility, the one I had destroyed in the future, the one I had to stop from existing. I reached the entrance. The gates were closed, but I could see through the high walls, the remnants of the technology I had once used to jump through time. And inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was Lena, not the real Lena, not the one I had just saved, but a version of her, locked in one of the ChronoSeed pods. Her eyes were closed, her body unmoving. It was her, but it wasn't. I walked toward the facility, my heart hammering in my chest. Something inside me screamed that I had missed a piece of the puzzle. That Lena, or what remained of her, was part of the equation I still hadn't solved. I had made a choice earlier, and I had chosen her. But what if it hadn't been enough? The gates creaked open as if responding to my thoughts. Inside, I found the familiar machinery, the heart of the ChronoSeed Project. Everything was in place, waiting for the next experiment to begin. But I couldn't hear the hum of time anymore. Instead, there was silence. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. My head whipped toward it. A figure stepped out from the dark. It was Dr. Elira Naveen, her face distorted, her eyes full of calculation. "You really thought you could escape this, didn't you?" she said with a cold smile. "The timelines don't forget. They can't." She raised a hand, and the machinery whirred to life. The air crackled. I felt the timeline beginning to twist again, pulling me in. I looked at Lena's pod once more. This was a final test. The last piece of the puzzle. I had one chance left. I pressed a button, and everything stopped. The ground beneath me trembled, and the world began to collapse. But this time, it wasn't just me who was breaking. It was time itself. The entire ChronoSeed facility crumbled, pieces of the structure falling apart, the machine sparking and dying. Dr. Naveen screamed, her voice lost in the sound of shattering glass and twisting metal. The timelines that had held me captive for so long ripped apart like frayed rope, and I was free. But as I fell to my knees in the debris, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. A voice, quiet, faint. "Daniel, it's not over." I turned, but the room was empty. Lena was gone. For good. I didn't know if I would ever wake up again. But one thing was clear. Whatever happened, whatever reality awaited me, I was no longer a prisoner of time. I had taken control.